What is up, guys? I'm back here with another preseason power rankings video, and this time I'm tackling the Big 12, probably the most competitive conference in the country. You never know what's going to happen week in and week out. It's just there's so much competitive balance here and parity here. I mean, last year you saw Arizona State picked to finish last in the conference and ended up making a playoff run and winning the conference. So you never know what's going to happen here. So I am going to try, but take this with a grain of salt because anything can happen in this conference. We're going to start at number 16, the bottom of the conference, with the UCF Knights. And a year ago, fans had some pretty big dreams for this team, high expectations under Gus Malzahn, but instead they ended up face planting. And now Malzahn is out, and UCF brings back Scott Frost, the coach who led them to that magical 13-0 season, but also the coach that flamed out spectacularly at Nebraska. So it's a reunion that's fueled by nostalgia, but the roster Frost inherits is far from the squad that was unbeaten whenever he was there last time. On offense, it's practically starting from scratch. There's a three-way quarterback battle, and none of the candidates are proven. The lone returner struggled last year, and the transfers don't really scream instant difference maker by any means. The wide receiver room is all new as well. Literally, every single person that caught a pass in 2024 is gone. The transfers did add some speed, but history says that chemistry there is going to take some time. The running back room, they lost their do-it-all star RJ Harvey, and his backups in Miles Montgomery and transfer Jaden Nixon are solid, but neither is going to be a game breaker. Along the offensive line, they lost their anchors. But center Carter Miller is steady, and the rest of the team is built from experience, but not elite portal guys. And so if we add it up, there are question marks everywhere and almost no obvious answers. But the best case here is that the new parts click by mid-season, but most likely I think it's going to be a shaky, inconsistent unit that struggles to keep up in shootouts. As for the defense, they should be better, but by how much? They have a slightly higher floor here, but it's still not a sure thing. New DC Alex Grinch arrives, and he's known for aggressive, turnover-hunting defenses, but also for infamously bad defenses at USC. Up front, they lost their top interior linemen, and so the run defense may take a step back here, but the edges could be the strength, led by Sincero Edwards and other returning playmakers. The linebacker core is rebuilt almost entirely with transfers. They're athletic, but they're going to take some time to gel. And the secondary is quietly decent. Corners have depth, and the safeties are talented and experienced, and the portal is going to bring even more depth here. It won't likely be a shutdown defense, but it could at least keep them in games if the offense can score at all. In summary, Scott Frost brings back a familiar face and a proven culture fit. But there's a brand new quarterback room, pretty much a brand new wide receiver room, loss of running back one and a rebuilt O-line, defense with more pieces but still, full of ifs. So this feels like a year one rebuild, not a quick fix. Bowl eligibility is possible here if the portal hits are, perfect, but more realistically, I think this is a transition year for the Knights, laying the groundwork for Frost's system. Frost's biggest job now is to convince fans to be patient because nostalgia alone will not plug all of these holes. At number 15, I have the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And last year's 3-9 collapse was not just a bad season, it was a full-on identity crisis for Mike Gundy and this program. So Gundy did what we really haven't seen in Stillwater before and hit the nuclear button. He brought in over 40 transfers, which means basically a whole new starting roster and a whole new second string roster as well. A depth chart that looks completely unfamiliar. And when you change that much, the upside can surprise, sure, but the floor can just fall out from under you just as easily. On offense, the Cowboys always used to have a pretty predictable system with a dangerous quarterback-wide receiver combo and capable of the run game. But now, almost nothing is proven. There's a quarterback battle there with two guys that have never thrown college passes. That's not just unproven upside. That's complete unknown. The top three wide receivers from last year, they're gone, and that room is full of entirely portal-built guys, hoping that one or two pop into real Big 12 weapons. At running back, they do return the number 2 to number 4 rushers, but there's no Ollie Gordon, so who can really say what they're going to be there? Offensive line built, again, almost entirely through the portal. Their size and experience there, but the chemistry piece can't really be predicted. Best case scenario is that they spread it around, they play it quick, and someone in the wide receiver room emerges. But right now, no proven go-to guy, average running back room, and an inexperienced quarterback, so it could get really bad. On defense, there's nowhere to go but up. They were awful last year. They were historically terrible. Only Kent State gave up more yards nationally. They couldn't stop the run. They got torched through the air, and the only thing that kept them afloat was the occasional pass rush. Gundy's staff threw the kitchen sink at it, though. So, again, portal reinforcements across the front, especially at edge. So, the pass rush might stay respectable. Linebacker room is completely rebuilt through transfers. More athleticism and better tackling should help. In the secondary, they're mixing a few returners with even more portal guys who should at least improve depth. But, again, if you can't sense the theme here, there's a lot of portal guys here. They should be better on defense because they truly can't be worse, but who knows? In summary, Oklahoma State is in total rebuild mode, and also it's going to be a total mystery as to what they put on the field. 2025 is the definition of a coin flip here. New faces literally everywhere. Young quarterbacks who might surprise or sink the offense, and defense that probably won't be good, but could be less catastrophic, I guess. Ceiling is a feisty bowl-eligible team if all the transfers hit perfectly, but the floor is honestly a no-win season. I could see this team winning 0 games. So either way, this is a pretty big gamble. I don't expect miracles overnight, and a rebuild like this is going to take some time, even in the portal era. At number 14, I have Arizona. And there was actually a quiet confidence around this team last season under Brent Brennan in his first year because he was able to retain their star wide receiver and quarterback. So they had some pretty big hopes, but they ended up falling flat. They were the second worst scoring offense in the league, and they had the second worst rushing offense as well. And to add insult into injury, their star receiver in Tedero McMillan is now in the NFL, and he was a rare game-changing talent who could turn nothing into points, so definitely hurts to see him walk away. So now in the second year, Brennan is going to have to press the reset button again. They bring in a new OC, fresh portal reinforcements, and a clear goal to fix an offense that simply couldn't move the ball consistently. So what is this offense going to look like now? Well, it's going to look different for sure. They will likely be faster, more spread out, but whether it's actually going to be good is a whole different story. The new wide receiver room does bring in some real speed. Watch Jaden Watley from Chattanooga. He is explosive after the catch. The offensive line has experience, but they remain short on Big 12 level talent, I think. And the run game, they're bringing in a guy whose name is kind of hard to pronounce, so I don't want to pronounce it wrong, but he's a Sun Belt star with legit burst ability at Arizona, just didn't have last year. The big worry here, though, is quarterback play, which is still shaky. Without consistent quarterback production, the ceiling for the entire offense stays pretty low. The bottom line here is improvement is likely because it's hard to get much worse, but a true breakout season is probably unlikely. As for the defense, pretty much anything will be better than what they trotted out last season. They needed a full reboot, and Brennan's staff made some pretty targeted moves here, starting with the DC, who they promoted internally, keeping scheme continuity while hoping for better execution. Secondary was rebuilt through the portal, and on paper, it does look solid, especially at corner. Safeties return, providing some veteran presence there. And their linebacker, Tay Brown, is another anchor in that middle, joined by several transfers to boost depth there. But the biggest weakness last season was stopping the run, and while the front seven has added some size, it still feels like that could be a soft spot against the physical Big 12 teams, especially like Utah or teams like that. In summary, year 2 under Brennan is pretty widely focused on adding speed on offense, upgrading size and depth on defense, and simply looking more like a complete team instead of a group of talent held together by 1 or 2 stars. So I think they should be harder to blow out, better at moving the chains, and probably a little bit more disciplined, but quarterback questions and suspect front seven keep the ceiling low. Bowl eligibility does still feel unlikely, but they should at least work to look like a more cohesive and competitive team than they were last year. In short, I think Brennan's rebuild is working, but they're not going to instantly be better, but I think they're making the right steps forward to make them relevant again. At number 13, I have the Houston Cougars. And last year wasn't really the turnaround that Houston fans had hoped for when they brought in Willie Fritz, but this offseason, Fritz got proactive. He reunited with his old OC from Tulane, the same guy who is responsible for those explosive Green Wave offenses, and together they hit the portal pretty dang hard, dramatically upgrading talent on both sides of the ball, and instead of just filling in and patching holes, they look like they might actually have a pretty balanced competitive team here. Last year, the Cougars offense felt pretty stuck in quicksand. That should change this season. Quarterback Connor Wigman was a former SEC guy with real arm talent and enough mobility to keep plays alive. And the big if is he going to stay healthy? At the wide receiver room, they get back Stephon Johnson, plus several experienced transfers, kind of turning that thin unit into something closer to a Big 12 average, or maybe even better. At running back, there's a solid group there that can move the chains, but they likely won't carry that offense. The O-line is completely rebuilt through the portal. Their size there and experience, but like I've said with many other offensive lines that are rebuilt with the portal, it's impossible to know how well they are going to gel together. But if the line does end up holding and Wigman clicks, this could be, go from painful to actually a pretty fun offense. On defense, they feel like quietly decent, but they still have some new questions here. Last year, they were, surprisingly strong. They were the second best run defense in the league, tough and disciplined up front, but they barely had any pass rush, which left the secondary pretty exposed. This year, that front seven added some size and a few natural pass rushers, hoping to finally pressure opposing quarterbacks. And the linebacker core brings back some veterans and Carmichael Glass, adding some athleticism there. The biggest red flag, though, is the secondary. They lost some top tacklers and most of last season's takeaway producers. They did rebuild through the portal, though, so there is talent, but chemistry, again, is going to take some time to trust. They might be able to stay respectable against the run, but the new look back end could be tested early and often. In summary, I think they're going to have a functional offense and a pretty respectable defense. I don't think Houston is quite at the spot where they're ready to challenge for a Big 12 title game, but the roster does feel like a real team instead of a team that's just hoping to hang on. If the offensive line holds together and Wigman stays healthy, like I mentioned, they could score enough to win some shootouts. And if the secondary isn't a total liability, they have a pretty scrappy defense as well. Upside is that they could make a bowl game. But the floor here is going to be another rebuilding year, but likely a less painful one to watch. In short, I think Fritz used the portal well and added the right coaches to his staff. And now, Houston might finally feel like they belong in the Big 12. At number 12, I have the Cincinnati Bearcats. And ever since joining the Big 12, Cincinnati has mostly looked like exactly what they are. A former Group of 5 school that's still adjusting to power conference depth and weekly physicality. This year, they're a little older, a little deeper, and they work the portal a little bit more smartly. But this is still about slow and steady improvement rather than a sudden jump to contention. On offense, their identity is going to have to be on the ground. Quarterback Brendan Sorsby is athletic. He can extend plays and add yards with his legs, but he must cut out the mistakes that he had last season and avoid trying to do too much. At running back, they did lose Corey Kiner, which is a huge blow, but they have some veteran guys still there and some tough transfers that came in that should mean that this position group is still a strength for this team. At wide receiver, it's basically a total reboot. Almost all new starters brought in via the portal. There is talent here, but again, like I've said with most of these position groups that are filled with portal talent, chemistry and consistency are huge unknowns. The offensive line does look serviceable in the starting five, but depth could still be an issue here. If injuries hit, then things could get a little rocky here. Overall, this is not a team that's going to blow you out through the air. It's going to be a team that's going to try to grind out yards on the ground, using the quarterback's legs, and hopefully, utilizing some of those new receivers to do just enough to keep them in these games. On defense, it's a strong spine. They've got more depth, and it's where Cincinnati looks quietly the most like a Big 12 team and not a Group of 5 team. Dante Corleone is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the country, and he's going to be an anchor for this team who makes everything else easier. The pass rush was lacking last season, but they added some portal guys for help that should be able to get after the quarterback more consistently, and linebackers are a clear strength. They're experienced, they're physical, and the emotional leaders of this unit. The secondary got younger overall, but they brought in some impact transfers to fill in some gaps and adding, that size and athleticism that they needed. The defense probably won't dominate every week, but they should be sturdier, deeper, and nastier up front, enough to keep them in a lot of these games. In summary, I think it's going to be a slow climb, not an instant splash. And what I mean by that is that they are still in transition. The offense is going to be able to run the ball and buy time for those new wide receivers to click, and the defense has a strong spine at D-line and linebacker with upgrades in the back. That probably adds up to a few upsets and more competitiveness than last season, and possibly sneaking into that bowl eligibility conversation. They're not going to, just automatically jump into the top half of the Big 12 yet, but this does feel like a team that is finally moving forward instead of just trying to keep their head above the water. At number 11, I have the West Virginia Mountaineers, and Rich Rodriguez is back in Morgantown, and so is his trademark style. It's going to be fast, it's going to be run heavy, and it's going to be chaotic in the best way. But this isn't the old Big East days, it's 2025. And West Virginia is in a spot where their roster is in need of a complete rebuild. They're powered by the transfer portal, and they have players that are trying to catch up in a deeper Big 12 conference. This season isn't really about titles, it's about building an identity in West Virginia. and laying the first bricks of that new era are going to be difficult. On offense, it's pretty much the transfer express because everything about this side of the ball is new. New offensive coordinator, entirely new wide receiver room built from the portal, with only one real returning name in Cam Vaughn from Jacksonville State, who does bring speed but still needs to prove that he can be a wide receiver one at this level. A new quarterback who has starting experience and enough mobility to keep defenses honest. And a running back room that is pretty huge for portal backs. Joined last year's leading rusher, Jaheim White. So expect Rich Rod to use all of them, pounding defenses with tempo and fresh legs. The biggest gamble here is the offensive line, though. It's completely overhauled. There's legit talent inside, but it takes time to build that chemistry, like I've said so many times. And in a hurry-up system like this, missed blocks can be disastrous. Overall, expect lots of running, lots of tempo, and inevitably lots of growing pains. On defense, they're kind of thin and untested. It's where West Virginia could really struggle early. Linebackers are thin with little proven depth. Secondary, they have some returning experience, but it's lost a lot of its top players. Depth is limited, which could be exposed against Big 12 passing teams. The defensive line should be solid up front, at least good enough to slow run teams and occasionally disrupt. But this unit overall feels like it's kind of patched together, and it might hold up against average offenses, but will likely get stretched out against the Big 12 better passing attacks. In summary, I think this is more of a build now, contend later type of model. In 2025, I think West Virginia is not chasing a conference title. They're chasing an identity like a lot of the teams I've mentioned before them. Offense is going to be high speed, heavy run, creative play design, and the defense is more of a bend but don't break unit until more depth arrives. If the offensive line does click quickly, they'll score points and steal a few games, but if not, it could be a pretty bumpy ride. Either way, the real goal is clear. Lay the foundation for what Rich Rod wants to build. Win a few games and maybe a season that sets the stage for something bigger down the road. At number 10, I have the Colorado Buffaloes. And there's no Shedeur Sanders, no Travis Hunter, so by far the two biggest names are gone. Yet, Deion Sanders stayed. And while it may not get the same viral headlines, what Deion quietly did this offseason might actually build a better football team than what they had last season. It's less built around star power and more built around balance, toughness, and depth. It's still Colorado, and there's still going to be chaotic moments, but this time it might look like an actual team. On offense, for all the talk around prime time last year, Colorado's offense was shockingly one-dimensional, or I guess for some people, not so shockingly. They were last in the FBS in rushing and totally reliant on Shedeur's arm. This year, they're going to pivot from that. They have a new quarterback in Caden Salter from Liberty. He's a true dual-threat guy who ran for more yards himself last year than Colorado's entire team. He's not polished as a passer, like Shedeur was, but his mobility could completely change what the Buffs can do offensively. The wide receiver room is deeper than before, even without that true superstar in Travis Hunter, so expect a more balanced distribution of the ball instead of forcing it every time to Hunter. Running backs are still pretty average here, but Salter's running threat should open lanes that didn't exist last year. And the O-line has been a chronic weakness under Deion so far, but they hit the portal again to fix it. Probably still not elite overnight, but it should be at least serviceable. Overall, this offense could be less explosive, but still more coherent and finally capable of sustaining drives on the ground. On defense, this could be Prime's best yet. The defense has often looked like an afterthought here, but that might finally change. The headline addition is Jaheim Otis, who's a massive D tackle from Alabama. Just having him in the middle should instantly upgrade Colorado's run defense. The front three overall look deeper and bigger than anything they had before, and the linebackers have true all Big 12 potential, plus they added depth through the portal, so I really like what I'm seeing here. In the secondary, there's no Travis Hunter again, so there's no headline shutdown guy, but as a unit, it's solid and balanced, and instead of living and dying on highlight plays, the defense might quietly be good enough to win games by itself. In summary, this is going to be a less highlight reel focused Colorado and more of a grinded out team. This season for Colorado is not going to look like it did last season. The quarterback is more about mobility than NFL arm talent, and the wide receivers are deeper but lack a single game breaker. The defense also has size and depth instead of living on takeaways. So there's still a lot of questions with the new quarterback consistency, the O-line gelling, and whether the running back room can produce enough. But this time, don't expect every single week to be a circus. Instead, expect Colorado to be a team that's tougher, less flashy, and maybe better where it counts. There's still a long shot for the Big 12 title, but for the first time under Deion, they might actually feel like a team that belongs and not just a group of transfer guys. At number 9, I have the Kansas Jayhawks, and no single player-coach combo has transformed a program quite like Jalen Daniels and Lance Leipold have at Kansas. Once a Big 12 afterthought, the Jayhawks have become must-watch football with Daniels under center. But last year proved fragile. An elite-looking offense on paper struggled to finish drives and gave the ball away way too often, and Daniels' injuries did not help. And when he's not on the field, the whole team looks just pretty ordinary. This season, it all starts and ends with Daniels once again. The offense should be fun this year. The Jayhawks do bring in a new offensive coordinator whose biggest job isn't to overhaul the scheme, but to clean up mistakes, cut turnovers, improve red zone execution, and keep Daniels healthy. Because when he plays, Kansas can score on anyone. He's dynamic as both a passer and a runner, and this year he'll probably need to carry even more of that load. The offensive line is quietly a strength, and it usually is under Leipold. They're experienced, they're tough, and they're able to protect Daniels while giving the run game a real shot. At running back, they did lose Devin Neal, which is a huge blow, but Kansas has a committee with Daniels himself likely adding to the ground game that should keep defenses off balance, and the wide receiver room is completely rebuilt through the portal. Talented, yes, but untested altogether. If the chemistry comes fast, Kansas can be pretty dang explosive. On defense, though, there are worries everywhere. It's pretty much where Kansas optimism fades. Linebackers are rebuilt through the portal, which means new faces, maybe some potential, but also, again, some risk. Secondary is young, shallow, and inexperienced. Against those Big 12 passing attacks, that's definitely going to be concerning. And the defensive line is improved through recruiting and transfers, but still not an elite group that can dominate in the trenches. When you put that all together, the Jayhawks will likely have to win in shootout fashion, something that's both fun and terrifying for their fans. In summary, they're fun, flawed, and unpredictable. When Daniels is healthy, Kansas will absolutely score points and scare bigger programs. But with so many new and unproven pieces on defense, the Jayhawks probably won't be able to consistently stop anyone. Expect high-scoring games, surprising wins, and frustrating defensive lapses that keep them from being true title contenders. Still, after where Kansas football used to be, playing meaningful, exciting games every week is already a success. And if Daniels stays healthy all year, they're the classic Big 12 team nobody's going to want to face. And at number 8, I have the Stormin' Mormons of BYU. Jokes aside, they quietly had a really solid season last year, competitive most weeks and anchored by a surprisingly stingy defense, but this year starts with a massive program-shaking curveball. Their projected starting quarterback was suspended for none other than premarital sex. Like it or not, that matters a lot for this team. It leaves an offense that's already thin at quarterback searching for answers and puts enormous pressure on the defense to carry even more of that weight. So, with the quarterback situation suddenly unsettled, BYU's offense is likely going to become a run-first team, second and maybe third. The good news here is they have LJ Martin, who has the talent to be one of the top running backs in the Big 12, if he can stay healthy. Martin is physical, he's smart, and he's explosive enough to break big plays, giving BYU at least one proven weapon defenses must account for. The wide receiver room might surprise people as well. It's experienced, it's deep, and actually looks like a pretty stable part of this offense right now, but the rest is concerning. The new quarterbacks competing for the position feel pretty underwhelming right now. None have shown that they can consistently stretch the field or run offense at a Big 12 level. The offensive line is also a work in progress, which is very risky whenever your identity shifts to the ground and pound type of offense. The result here is I expect BYU to lean heavily on Martin in that short passing game just to stay on schedule. On defense, though, they are quietly elite. Last season, the defense had a strange mix of flaws and strengths, almost no pass rush, few tackles for loss, and bad on third downs. Yet, they finished as the best scoring defense in the conference. How? Well, turnovers, discipline, and situational toughness, hallmarks of a well-coached unit. They returned both starting linebackers, giving leadership and continuity in the middle, and the secondary looks like a real strength, especially at corner where BYU is going to match up pretty well against most Big 12 receiving corps. To address the soft front, BYU added size to the portal on the defensive line, hoping to get a bit nastier inside and improve against the run. In summary, the defense is not going to be able to carry it all. BYU will want to play smart, tough defense that keeps them in games, but with that unexpected quarterback suspension, a shaky offensive line, and a run-heavy plan that could get predictable, it's hard to see BYU truly contending for the Big 12 this season. They'll probably pull off an upset or two thanks to the defense, but week to week, the offensive ceiling just feels too low for me. At number 7, I have Utah, and they joined the Big 12 expecting to flex their usual toughness and experience, but instead, they stumbled badly on offense, finishing among the worst statistical teams in the entire country, which is honestly a stunning reality for a team that's usually so steady, so consistent, and so balanced. So in response, Kyle Whittingham responded decisively, hiring a new OC in Jason Beck to overhaul a unit that desperately needed some new ideas and better execution. So on offense, the center of the reboot is quarterback Devin Dampier. He followed Beck from New Mexico, and he is a true dual threat guy. He's athletic, he's creative, and he's coming off of a season where he led a top 5 offense in the country. But the raw talent he has does come with some rough edges. His completion percentage is only at 58%, and that needs to improve. And turnovers were definitely an issue. So in a deeper, more balanced Big 12 conference, those mistakes could be really costly. The offensive line could be a real strength for this team because they're experienced, they're physical, and they're ready to protect Dampier while helping establish the run. And this is a kind of offensive line that you don't normally see in the Big 12. So it's definitely a special unit. At running back, Utah added Wayshawn Parker from Washington State, and he is a Swiss Army knife who can run, catch, and move around the formation and create mismatches. As for the wide receiver room, it's a bit of patchwork. They are heavily reliant on the portal, but one of Dampier's favorite targets from New Mexico came with him, which definitely helps. But overall, it still feels like a work in progress, and chemistry may take some time to develop. On defense, it's the same Utah identity. Even in down years offensively, Utah defense has stayed true to its brand. Physical, aggressive, and hard to move the chains against. Third nationally in third down stops, second nationally in first downs allowed. This defense keeps Utah competitive in almost every single game. This year, they'll have to replace standout linebacker Kareem Reed, but the team's leading tackler returns to steady the middle. Up front, the defensive line is big and physical inside, but there isn't much proven depth, so injuries could quickly become a problem. In the secondary, safeties do look solid and experienced, but the corners are younger and could face some growing pains here, especially against Big 12's wide-open passing attacks. Through it all, Utah's defensive coordinator keeps them aggressive and creative, making Utah's defense hard to predict and always disruptive. In summary, Utah's floor is high because of its defense and Whittingham's culture, but their ceiling depends almost entirely on that offensive reboot. If Dampier improves accuracy and avoids turnovers, the offense should clearly be better than last year's rock-bottom finish. But with a mostly new receiving core and limited depth, expecting them to dominate might be a stretch. The defense will keep them competitive every single week, but this year, don't expect the old-style total Utah domination. Instead, look for a tougher, smarter offense paired with a defense that still punches above its weight. If the pieces come together, Utah could sneak into the Big 12 title conversation. If not, a solid bowl-bound team, but not the powerhouse they hoped to be when they first joined the league. At number 6, I have TCU, and last year was a roller coaster for the Horned Frogs because inconsistent plays kept them out of the conference title race, but amid the ups and downs emerged a bright spot, and that is quarterback Josh Hoover. Hoover wasn't just good, he was electric. He led the Big 12 in passing yards, and he set a single-season record at TCU. His emergence gives the Horned Frogs real optimism that even with the roster turnover, they can keep lighting up scoreboards. So on offense, they will go as far as Hoover can take them. And that is saying a lot. Yes, he lost his top 3 receivers last season, but the cupboard is not empty. Aaron McAllister is back to headline the group, and the staff mined the portal, adding players like Jordan Dwyer from Idaho, who showed big play potential. The offensive line is quietly one of the steadier units in the league. They're experienced, they're talented, and they're enough to keep Hoover upright. And the run game won't be the centerpiece, but Nate Palmer could give defenses something to think about, just enough to keep safeties honest, really. But make no mistake, this is a pass-first team and probably pass second, third, and fourth as well. But what does that mean? Expect plenty of shootouts. Hoover has already shown that he can keep TCU in any game. As for the defense, they have a decent spine but some shaky edges. TCU's defense had late season improvement last year, but there's some real work to do here. Good news is Bud Clark is an all Big 12 safety, and he returns as a proven playmaker in the secondary, and 2 senior linebackers add stability and leadership. The defensive line should be better at generating pressure, helped by added depth through the portal. The worry here, though, is the rest of the secondary, especially at corner. Outside of Clark, it's an unproven group that could be targeted often by the conference's better passing attacks. In the Big 12, where teams can score in bunches, that's a real risk. TCU might improve, but it's unlikely to transform into a shutdown defense overnight. In summary, the Horned Frogs will score on almost everyone. But can they stop enough teams to climb back into the conference title mix? Probably not. At least, not consistently. That said, Hoover's talent alone gives them a puncher's chance in just about any game. And in a wide-open league like the Big 12, that might be enough to surprise a contender or two and make every single Saturday a must-watch for this team. In short, expect fireworks, expect drama, and expect TCU to be in a lot of 41 to 38 games. Hoover makes them dangerous even if they remain flawed. At number 5, I have Baylor. And last season, some rumors started swirling around about Dave Aranda being on the hot seat. But a strong finish cooled things down, and now that conversation has quietly flipped. Around Waco, some fans are starting to talk about not just an improvement, but whispering about a possible playoff run. And here's the reason. The offense looks ready to compete with just about anybody, and that's paired with an aggressive defensive overhaul through the portal. At quarterback, Sawyer Robinson returns after a solid season that showcased efficiency, poise, and enough big playability to stretch defenses. He might not be a household name nationally yet, but within the Big 12, he's respected as a steady, dependable leader. And the running back room has some real star power. Bryson Washington adds some explosive potential. He's coming off of a record-setting freshman season. And Dawson Pendergrass is a bigger back who can handle tough yards and keep the chains moving. Up front, Baylor quietly boasts one of the best offensive lines in the country, retaining 4 of their 5 starters from a unit that played at a truly elite level late last season. That continuity matters and should open up everything from the run game to giving Robinson time to operate. Put that all together, and you got an offense that's balanced, experienced, and a tough scheme to go against. And on paper, it really does look playoff ready. And on defense, it's all about the portal. Defense is where Baylor's season is really going to be decided. Last year, they struggled badly, bottom nationally in most key metrics, plagued by missed tackles, lack of pass rush, and blown coverages. But this year, like I said, they went to the portal. They got Calvin Simpson-Hunt from Ohio State, who's a physically gifted corner who could become a true lockdown presence. They added Devin Turner from Northwestern, who's a proven ball-hawking safety to stabilize that back end. They added Marion Winston from Oregon, who will help in the pass rush department to get that consistent pressure. Plus, new linebackers brought in specifically to clean up the tackling issues that cost them games last year. It's a clear strategy, keep the offensive core intact, and bet on the portal to transform that defense from liability to strength. So, in summary, Baylor's floor and ceiling couldn't be more different. If defensive transfers click, the Bears have the offense and trench play to seriously challenge for the Big 12 title, and maybe even sneak into the playoffs. If the portal fixes don't stick, though, expect another season that is full of wasted potential. At number 4, I have the Iowa State Cyclones, and last year was nothing short of magical in Ames. Iowa State weathered major injuries, won 11 games, reached the Big 12 title game, and finished it off by winning the Pop-Tarts Bowl, the best bowl game in all history. So for a program built on toughness and resourcefulness, it was validation that Matt Campbell's system can deliver at the highest level. But now comes the hard part, doing it again after losing some of the stars who helped make it happen. The good news here is they retain one of their most important players in quarterback Rocco Becht. Statistically, Becht was historically good by advanced metrics last season, delivering big plays and protecting the football. But there's still a next level for him to take, and that comes in the form of him improving his completion percentage, especially in high leverage situations, to keep those drives alive. The challenge will be that he's throwing to a new cast of targets. Iowa State lost 2 receivers to the NFL, which means new faces must step up right away. And there is optimism in that room, but it's still unproven. Up front, the offensive line isn't brand new. It's more of a shuffle. They're experienced, but they're going to have to quickly find cohesion to keep Becht up and keep that run game established. Speaking of the run game, the running back room might be the most quietly stable part of this offense. It lacks a household name, but it's deep enough to stay productive and give the offense balance, which Becht badly needs. Defensively, Iowa State built a reputation last year by turning the field into a no-fly zone. They finished with the number 1 pass defense nationally, and the Cyclones excelled at disguising coverages, forcing bad throws, and winning 3rd and long. But there was one fatal flaw, and that was run defense. Opponents found they could just line up and pound the rock. Compounding that, the defense also struggled to generate real pass rush, meaning that opposing quarterbacks often had time to throw when they did choose to go that route. So how did they plan to fix this? Well, they went and they overhauled the front 7. They brought in some new bodies through the portal, and they shifted some roles around to plug the gaps, but the defensive end still feels like a question mark for me. If the new look works, the defense could be balanced and better overall, but if not, it could be the same issues coming back again. The secondary remains the backbone of this defense. Multiple starters returned, but they did lose some of their top tacklers, which could be even more significant if that front 7 isn't fixed. At linebacker, there's real talent here, but there are some health concerns which could test the depth pretty quickly. In summary, Iowa State has a strong base to build on. a proven, efficient quarterback in Beck, smart, targeted portal additions, and a defense that already excels against the pass. But they also lost some really big playmakers, especially at receiver, and they still have question marks in the front seven that could haunt them against run-heavy teams. If the replacements on offense step up and the defense can find balance, Iowa State could absolutely make another Big 12 title run. If not, expect a slight step back to that 8 to 9 win range. Either way, Campbell has built a culture where Iowa State is no longer a spoiler. They're a team everyone circles on their schedule. And even after the best year in program history, they're still chasing something bigger. At number 3, I have Kansas State. And they made a pretty gutsy call at quarterback last season, handing the starting job over to Avery Johnson, believing in his upside and his dynamic playmaking ability, even if that meant that veteran quarterback Will Howard would transfer out. Well, Howard landed at Ohio State, and in storybook fashion, he ended up leading the Buckeyes to a national title. Meanwhile, Kansas State still had a strong year with Johnson under center, showing some flashes of why the staff believed he was the better long-term fit. So the question isn't really can he play anymore, but whether he can take that next step, not just to be a dangerous dual-threat quarterback, but a more polished, efficient passer who avoids costly turnovers. On offense, they quietly built an offense around balance and versatility. At running back, they've got 2 distinct weapons, Dylan Edwards, who's electric in space, dangerous as a receiver, and adds a threat to score anytime he touches it, and Joe Jackson, who brings a more physical, downhill element to keep defenses honest. The 1-2 punch should definitely keep defenses guessing and take the pressure off of Johnson, and the offensive line did lose some veterans, but K-State's track record says they will remain steady, physical, and fundamentally strong up front because that's what they have been. In the passing game, Johnson isn't really short on options. Jace Brown looks like a breakout candidate at wide receiver, and Garrett Oakley gives them an all-conference caliber tight end who can stretch the seams. Plus, a few proven portal additions add depth and experience. For Johnson, the upside is enormous. He's already showed some real flashes that he can extend plays and create magic, so the next step is sharpening his accuracy and trimming down the mistakes, the interceptions, so that the offense can finish more of their drives. On defense, trenches rule. If Kansas State contends, it'll be because of this defense, especially up front. They might have the best defensive line in the Big 12. They're deep, they're experienced, and they're capable of disrupting both the pass game and the run game. It's the kind of front that can win games by themselves. At linebacker, Austin Romaine anchors the middle and might be the best in the league. Smart, physical, and always around the football. The worry here is the secondary. Outside of proven All-Big 12 safety VJ Payne, the rest of the defensive backs are mostly new or unproven at this level. The staff turned to the portal to fill the holes, but it is untested until the games start. Against the Big 12's deeper passing attacks, that could decide whether K-State finishes at the top or just behind. At number 2, I have Texas Tech. No team in the country owned the transfer portal quite like they did. The Red Raiders didn't just patch holes, they built an entirely new ceiling, landing not just the best transfer portal class this cycle, but the best transfer portal class ever. The roster overhaul feels less like desperation and more like an intentional and aggressive strategy. It's clear. Texas Tech is done being middle of the pack. They want to contend right now. And that starts on offense, with Behren Morton at quarterback, who has shown some real arm talent and some flashes of brilliance. The only knock here is that he has had some troubles staying healthy, but when he's on the field, he is keeping that offense humming. At wide receiver, yes, they are losing Josh Kelly, which does sting, but they have restocked and reloaded. Reggie Virgil, who's averaged an eye-popping 20 yards per catch, joins returning playmakers Caleb Douglas and Coy Easkin, forming a group that can stretch the field vertically and threaten defense on every single snap. The ground game also took some retooling after losing workhorse Taj Brooks, but here's where the portal magic shows. Quentin Joyner arrives from USC, bringing groundbreaking speed and the ability to rip off big chunk plays, over 7 yards per carry last season. Expect a different style of run game, maybe less pounding and more explosive. Up front, the offensive line was upgraded through the portal, aiming to give Morton more protection and create space for the new backs. And it all comes together under OC Mac Leftwich, a rising coaching star whose scheme is built to maximize and blend returning talent and transfer portal talent. Bottom line, the offense might look different. In fact, it definitely is going to look different, but it could be even more dangerous. If Morton stays upright, Tech can light up the scoreboard. Defense was Texas Tech's Achilles heel last year. Too often it turned into shootouts, and those shootouts turned into losses. But here's where Texas Tech attacked the portal the hardest. They brought in 5 elite defensive linemen, highlighted by edge rusher David Bailey, to immediately upgrade this pass rush and run defense. If those newcomers deliver, the entire front seven takes a massive step forward. At linebacker, they don't have to start over. Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts return, both all Big 12 potential and experience in this system. That continuity in the middle is critical. The secondary, while not flashy, is solid and deeper than they were last year. If the defensive line can create real pressure, the back end should benefit. And that could be the difference between another average season and something truly special. So in summary, Texas Tech is the classic high ceiling, low floor team. If the portal pieces click, especially on the defensive front, Tech can beat anyone on their schedule and challenge for the conference title. If they don't mesh, it could be a real problem. The talent they've assembled says to believe. The Red Raiders are not building for 2 years from now. They're going for it this year. If Morin stays healthy, Joyner produces, and the rebuilt defense finds its identity, Texas Tech might turn portal hype into on-field reality and force the rest of the Big 12 to catch up. At number 1, the team that I think is the best in the Big 12, I have Arizona State. And they were the shock story of last season. They were picked dead last in the preseason. Instead, they won the league outright, grabbed a bye from their conference championship game, and were a couple plays away from beating Texas to reach the national semifinals. My biggest takeaway is Kenny Dillingham can absolutely coach. And the talent on that roster was far better than anyone gave them credit for. And the even scarier part is most of that attack returns. Arizona State is the number 1 team in the country when it comes to returning production, and nearly all the starters return, plus key backups, and the entire coaching staff stays intact. Continuity that is pretty rare to see in today's transfer portal era. On paper, they might boast one of the nation's best defenses on one side of the ball and a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender in Sam Leavitt on the other. So let's talk about their offense. And like I said, Leavitt is not just good. He is special. As a true freshman, he played beyond his years, and now, as a sophomore, the expectation is that he'll be even better. Leavitt is a baller with a capital B. He can improvise, he's tough, and he is able to command and elevate everyone around him. The pass-catching group is in great shape. Jordan Tyson is still one of the conference's best wide receivers, and there's depth and transfer support behind him. Plus, you have an all-conference tight end who can stretch the field and be reliable as a safety valve. The offensive line is another strength. They have 4 starters that are all Big 12 level talent, which should keep Leavitt upright and give the offense some balance. And balance is the key word here, because the only major loss here is a huge one. It's Cam Skattebo. Skattebo was not just a productive back, he was also the emotional heartbeat and a rare dual threat runner receiver who kept defenses honest. Losing him leaves a significant hole that just can't be fully replaced. Still, the running back room is not in bad shape. They added Kanye Udo from Army, and that's definitely an intriguing addition, and there are also 2 other capable backs that are going to put up respectable numbers. The running game is not going to replicate what Skattebo did, but it should be good enough to prevent defenses from completely selling out against the pass. It also helps that this team played pretty disciplined football last season. They tied for 3rd nationally in fewest turnovers, so expect them to be pretty mistake-free again, which is critical in close games. On defense, they are tough, experienced, and deep. This was the team's calling card last year, and it might be even better this fall. Arizona State finished best in the Big 12 at defending against the run. And I can probably chalk that up to the fact that they had to go against Skattebo every single day in practice, but either way, it was effective. And they were also elite at forcing turnovers and making clutch stops on 3rd down. Most of the playmakers return, including experienced veterans at every single level. Linebackers are one of the best groups in the conference, safeties possibly the best in the league, and the corners are talented and tested. The only real weakness this season is the lack of a consistent pass rush, something that has historically plagued Big 12 defenses, but even here, there's room for optimism. Players who are banged up are healthy again, and the staff added a few new promising edge rushers through the portal. The pass rush might not be a team's strength, but it could become less of a liability. The bottom line here is that Arizona State overachieved last year, but this year's squad has the feel of a team that can prove that that was not a fluke. The big question is, how do they adjust without Skattebo? They don't need to fully replace him, but they do need a run game good enough to keep defenses honest. And if that happens, Leavitt takes another step forward, and I think Arizona State not only defends their conference title, but is in the mix for something even bigger. They are loaded, they are experienced, and they are fearless. This team has earned everyone's respect. So that's my list for the Big 12, guys. I hope you guys liked. If you did, please drop a like, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think. So, yeah, anyways, peace.